Welcome to Mystery Date, where we dive into the weird, the wild, and the downright puzzling. While our podcast is primarily for entertainment with plenty of laughs along the way, we occasionally discuss serious and sensitive topics. Some content may not be suitable for all listeners, so discretion is advised.
It's Thanksgiving Eve, 1971. The holiday rush has packed airports across the country. But on a stormy runway in Portland, Oregon, a man in a business suit and a clip-on tie steps onto Northwest Orient Flight 305 with nothing but a briefcase and a name no one will remember correctly. 40 minutes later, he hands a note to a flight attendant. It says, "I have a bomb." What follows is part high-stakes heist, part vanishing act. He demands $200,000, parachutes, and a getaway with wings. Hours later, somewhere over the dense forests of Washington state, he opens the rear stairway of the 727, steps into the freezing night air, and disappears without a trace. No body, no confirmed identity, no solid answers. Just a whispered name through conspiracy theories and dive bar legends. Was he a desperate man with nothing left to lose? Or a mastermind who beat the system and walked away? This is the story of the only unsolved hijacking in U.S. history, and the man who jumped into myth. This is the story of D.B. Cooper.
I'm Christian.
I'm Kate.
Welcome to Mystery Date. It's date night, meaning we get to talk about all things mysterious and weird.
This season is called Into the Woods, and it involves mysteries surrounding woods, jungles, and forests all around our world.
Tonight's mystery is all about D.B. Cooper.
Get comfy, grab your favorite drink, and let's start the show.
All right. So, like we start every single episode usually, what do you know about D.B. Cooper?
I know that the movie Without a Paddle features the guys hunting down D.B. Cooper's treasure.
Yes, that's true. Yep.
That's about it. That's literally all I've ever heard of it. It's like I knew he was like a guy who had either robbed a bank or like somehow made some deal, like a guy who like had a heist to get money and then disappeared, and like somehow like legend said the money was out there.
That's pretty much it.
That's all I know.
Yeah, and I mean, Without a Paddle, they talk about it a little bit.
That's where all my knowledge of it comes from.
Yep. They even find him in that movie and find the cash. So they've come to their own conclusion on how this story ends. But we'll dive straight into it. And by the end of it, I promise you'll see how this fits into the woods theme, because it does not start in the woods at all.
Yeah. Good
All right.
movie, by the way, Without a
great
Paddle.
movie.
If you haven't seen it, it's a comedic gem.
Matthew Lillard, Dax Shepard, and Seth Green. Oh my God. They all need to get together. Not Without a Paddle too, because they did that and it was horrible, but they all need to get together and
They need to do
something again. All right, I got to change out the sunglasses because I can't see shit.
Yeah.
They looked cool though, so that was a good intro.
You have a good D.B. Cooper vibe going.
Yes, I'm trying. That was the whole goal. But back to glasses, because I'm an old man and I got to be able to read. All right. So our story takes us all the way back to the year 1971.
All the way back.
I mean, hey, it's like 50-something years now. That's a little bit. I mean, here, let's get into it. The first microprocessor was invented. The Soviets launched their first space station, and the United States lowered their voting age to 18 years old.
Well, yeah, when you put it like that, it does seem like a long time ago.
Yeah, we're going back to 1971.
I guess I forgot how quickly the world changes.
People were wearing bright colors with hippie and soul influences, opposing the Vietnam War or liberating their country from an oppressor. Political tensions were at an all-time high globally, and economically, everyone was feeling this. So, let's stay in 1971, but let's shift our viewpoint to the aviation industry at the time, as it lays important groundwork for what our story turns into tonight. By the 70s, commercial flying was still considered a luxury to most. While the industry was by no means new, the first commercial flight was in 1914, and this was by a man named Tony Janis in Florida. He apparently just took a few people in one of his own planes, but he charged for it, so it was a commercial flight.
All right.
But it was still a very awe-inspiring and out-of-reach dream for a lot of people at this time. By the year 1971, though, it had become quite popular with businessmen traveling back and forth between large metropolitan cities. And this was largely the main purpose for commercial flying in this time, was business transactions. The 70s were a big time for the aircraft industry, and this decade saw the birth on many new aircraft models, specifically those models that would be used for commercial flights. This would include the Boeing 747 and the McDonnell Douglas DC-10. That's just for some plane nerds out there that are listening. Give them some stats, because they do come up. That is a little relevant. Something this industry would also be dealing with at the time, and it's worth mentioning as a little teaser, are hijackings. From 1968 to 1972, the United States experienced a peak in hijackings when compared to other years, specifically in the year 1971. During this period, the Aviation Safety Network recorded 305 hijackings globally.
Holy crap! That's a lot.
Yeah. Let's compare it. In 2024, there was only a reported 6 vessels that experienced a hijacking. Not even a successful one. That just experienced this happening. Some of those weren't successful hijackings. So you had 305 compared to the 6 that we had last year.
Well, at least there's been improvement.
It's...
I will take those new numbers.
Yeah, so when you get upset going through TSA, just
remember, before TSA, there was problems.
Now that we have a little bit of an understanding and are in the mindset of 1971, and we have some knowledge of the commercial aviation industry at the time, we can move on to this actual story. Enough of the fluff leading up to it. I promise. We're getting into the good stuff. So let's talk about the hijacking. It was a brisk afternoon on the day before Thanksgiving on November 24th, 1971. A quiet, unsuspecting man purchases a ticket boarding Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305 from Portland to Seattle. This man identified himself as Dan Cooper. Dan Cooper would wait patiently at his gate before boarding his flight scheduled for 2:50 p.m. PST. He smoked a few cigarettes and drank a bourbon and soda. After waiting his turn, Dan would board Flight 305 along with 36 passengers and 6 crew members. This flight would be aboard a Boeing 727 aircraft, which, like we said before, the Boeing 747 had just come out, and that was a slightly newer model of this one. So it was slightly older when compared to the speed of technology at the time and the rise of all of these newer models, but it was still very competitive. It was a good model aircraft and was used heavily at the time. Despite it being older than some of the others offered out there, like I said, it was a very capable plane with a specific feature that would become pretty damning later on. And on a weird side note, the last commercial flight of this plane model was actually in the year 2019, and there are still some of these flying around today privately.
Oh, wow.
So they were heavily used and heavily dependable machines.
Kind of crazy that they didn't discontinue them after these hijackings and specifically after this incident.
Well,
because of that feature.
When we talk about the feature, you'll see it's not a feature that's something that's like, oh, that didn't necessarily help in the hijacking. It was just very specific. So it was something that Dan knew about this plane that helped him escape. And
that was all part of the plan.
Yes. So he had knowledge of aircrafts a little bit. Witnesses described Dan Cooper as being a white male in his mid-40s. He was about 5'9" to 5'10", clean-shaven with short, dark hair. He was wearing a dark color business suit with a white shirt and a narrow black tie. He would also be carrying a black, thin briefcase. Flight 305 would leave from Portland as planned and on schedule, and the passengers aboard were enjoying an outdated way of flying that is seemingly lost completely in today's world. And what I mostly mean by that is flying was still seen as a pretty classy thing to do back then. It wasn't just throw on your t-shirt and some Florida shorts and then you're good to go and you're just ready for your vacation when you get there. It was, we got to dress up and we got to kind of plan for this. Show a sense of class. Shortly after takeoff, around 3 p.m., Dan Cooper would sit in his chair, calmly smoking his cigarette while slowly scribbling something on a small piece of paper. When a flight attendant by the name of Florence Schaffner would pass by Dan, he would grab her attention. Once he had it, he would slip her a small piece of paper he had been writing on moments earlier. Now, Florence being a flight attendant in the 70s and Dan being a man in his mid-40s, she thought it was just him attempting to give her his information.
Yeah, he's like, hey, sweet thing, here's my number. Let's hook up later.
Exactly. And she's seen this many times. Like,
yeah, she's like, oh, thank you. And she's like, I'm going to go back to work now.
I mean, airlines hired flight attendants and stewardesses based on their looks at the time. It is very well known
it was
that
almost always females.
Yes.
It was very much like all right, hire the pretty girls for this job.
Exactly. They knew what they were doing, and a lot of these girls had to deal with some pretty bad stuff during this time, but that's not what we're here to talk about.
Sidebar, can we mention the fact that he was also smoking on this flight? Like,
yes, which it was fine. I looked it up. It's totally okay.
I was gonna say, yeah, it was the 70s. I'm sure it was allowed back then.
I actually read that United during this decade were the first airlines to add a non-smoking section.
And even that, like a smoking and non-smoking section, as if you could possibly like keep that separate on a small plane, like. Even first class, it's only separated by a curtain.
Yeah, and this guy was smoking a lot, too. This was just the beginning. Throughout this whole flight, he would just continuously chain smoke.
They're worried about this bomb he says he has. I mean, everybody's chain smoking. This flight could go up in flames at any minute.
I mean, no, for real. He apparently, we'll get into it, but has a bomb, and he's just smoking right next to it. I didn't even think about that.
The good old days.
So with this being Florence's thought, she laughed it off and went on with her business, tending to other passengers, not thinking much of this note. But the next time she would pass Dan, however, he would be sure to tell her, "Miss, I really think you ought to read that note." This took Florence by surprise. The subtle hostility in the man's voice gave her an uneasy feeling as she took his words very seriously.
Oh, so it was probably more of like a, "Miss, I really think you ought to read that note."
Yes, good delivery.
And
that
she's
was
like,
solid.
"Oh, okay."
Pretty much, yeah. So she reaches into her pocket to retrieve the folded piece of paper that Dan had slipped her earlier, and she unfolds it and begins to read as Dan watches, emotionless and still-faced. The note read, "Miss, I have a bomb and would like you to sit with me." Take that in for a moment. You're just doing your job.
Yikes.
This calm dude who's been slowly smoking.
I do like, please don't make me sit down here. I do like, I'll do like, if you want me to tell the captain something, if you want me to like go get somebody else, like I don't not
have nothing
have the
for
pay
you.
grade
Yeah,
for this, sir.
But you're 10,000 feet in the air. What are you going to do? That's horrifying.
Well, and yeah, I mean, in the moment when something like that occurs, even if it's not that high of stakes, if a threatening man has put you in a vulnerable situation and is like, just sit down, most women are just going to be like, okay, I'll do what he says. I'll be quiet and cooperate. We're going to see how this plays out, and I'll take my first chance at escape when I get it. Like,
And these aren't huge aircrafts. I meant to show you earlier. I had a picture included here, but they're like mid-sized, I'd say. So
okay, yeah. I mean, they're not like some of these
the
giant
double-decker or triple-decker,
you see today, but it's also not like a little hot dog plane either.
No.
It's a good size.
So, I mean, they're kind of in this tight-ass space. There might even be other passengers that could hear. I mean, there's not that many passengers on at the time. I think it was like 36, but...
Well, yeah, it's probably, it's probably not a 3-road or section
I'm
plane,
sure
it's
two.
probably just 2 on either side,
Yep.
and it's like maybe there's a small first-class section and then the regular, and that's it. Not the biggest plane, but like I said, not one of those little like 15-passenger hot dogs either.
No. So with Dan saying that ominous message, this took Florence by surprise, like I said, but once she read the note, she just sat pretty stunned, staring down at DB Cooper, and she did eventually sit down next to the man. It is stated in some sources that Florence questioned whether or not Cooper, as we'll refer to him as now, because that's just easier. There are many different names. He wasn't known as DB Cooper at this moment. For now, it was still just Dan Cooper to everybody, but we're just going to keep saying Cooper. So she questioned whether or not Cooper was being serious. Some even say that she asked to see the bomb, but regardless, Cooper did show her what was in the suitcase. So whether she was brave enough to ask or he eventually was just like, I'll show you, she did find and see what was in there. Inside, Florence Schaffner reported seeing 8 red cylinders with red insulated wires attached to a cylindrical battery.
So, I mean, yeah, I'm not like a weapons analyst or any sort of war or science expert or anything like that. But if I saw that, I'd be like, that definitely could be a bomb. I mean, it looks legit to me.
I mean, again, you're 10,000 feet in the air. This dude holds all the cards at this point, and yeah, it looks like a bomb. So why at any point
just
would
a bunch of red wires and batteries and stuff, I'd be like, fuck.
And I'd like, unless it's like red crayons that have been strung together and it's obvious.
Like fake dynamite that you give to a little kid's play set for the Toy Story build.
But no, anything of that sort would freak the fuck out of me. I would immediately be like, okay, yep, that's a bomb.
Yep.
And that's pretty much...
I buy it.
Yeah. And that's pretty much what she thought. Cooper would also be sure after this to take the small note that he had given Florence and stuff it back into his jacket. So, yeah,
so
again...
that's part of why he wanted her to sit with him, is because he wanted that back.
He is a smart, calculated dude, it seems, so far. I mean, he's taking back evidence. He knew what the plane was going to be. He knew to get a flight attendant's attention first instead of one of like just going to the captain or announcing like a hijacking to cause a panic.
It's even lucky that he had a seat available next to him. I wonder if he somehow like was able to make that happen. I don't know how things like seat assignments used to work on planes.
Yeah, back
For all I know, it was always just first come, first serve, choose your seat back then.
I would imagine it was a choose your seat system, especially with the lack of like computer technology like we have today, where you can just automatically assign a whole plane. I'm sure it was more or less just, you got a ticket.
Yeah, it was more just, we show you a physical boarding pass and then say, all right, you're in coach, go ahead.
So he probably, but again, that does show forethought where he was like, I got to pick an empty seat.
Yep.
He could have sat next to a passenger and slipped it to that. Like there's so many calculated things.
It was a flight attendant and not just someone else.
Yeah. It's crazy, honestly, the whole thing. So, after he took back the small note, Cooper would give his demands to the flight attendant. He demanded $200,000 cash in U.S. currency, 4 parachutes, and a fuel truck to be standing by on the flight arrival to Seattle. So, again, $200,000 in cash, 4 parachutes, and a fuel truck. Once the plane arrived in Seattle, all of that stuff would be waiting for him. And just a heads up, real quick, $200,000 is about $1.5 million today.
Okay, well that makes it better. What I was about to say, I was like, $200,000? Like you're going to, through all of this, you're going to go to this extraordinary means just for $200K? Like, you're not even going to ask for $1 million, but I did forget about like the currency displacement over time. But still, even $1 million, like you're gonna hijack a plane, build a bomb, and like threaten the freaking U.S. national security, basically, for $1 million bucks.
And he asked for parachutes. He was gonna jump from a plane. Like, yeah, that you're asking, like that's a low amount. I mean, we don't have $1.5 million. I'm sure a lot of you don't have $1.5 million.
But if you're risking your life as you know it, like you can never go back to living in society who you are without always being in hiding and on the run. Like you're already taking the risk of ruining your life and so forth, metaphorically ending your life.
Yeah.
But then like he's planning to jump from a plane. He asks for parachutes. You're risking your literal physical life as well as your metaphorical life for 1 million. But like, I just feel like that's not worth
No,
it.
yeah, even when you convert it to today,
I
man.
would do some shit for $1 million. Don't get me wrong. I would take some dares. All
Oh,
right.
yeah.
I would do a lot for 1 million. Risk being on the run forever slash dying for that money. Like,
No, as a small side tangent, and I'm not anything near like a financial advisor or someone who's really into business or anything like that, but $1.5 million, like that, like you said, that's not, it's life changing, but that's not life dependable. You can't live off of that forever. But what you could do is if you had $1.5 million, is that's building money. You start a business, you invest it. That is stuff that you would put back in to eventually see growth later on. Not rob a bank and
take it
immediately
and run and live in the wilderness off of it. Cause like, it'll get you a handful of years, but like, you're not gonna be set up for life.
unless his plan, and I didn't look into currency conversion for all of this because that would be a lot of math. But unless his plan was to like flee to Mexico, or because a little spoiler, he does ask him to fly to Mexico at one point.
Oh, right. I was gonna
But
say, if this happened over like Washington or Oregon, then if anything, like, wouldn't the plan be Canada? And I don't think the currency conversion would be in his favor there. Again, I don't know how it was in the 70s.
yeah, that's a lot of math.
So who
So
knows,
please, if you
but-
know, let us know if it would make a lot of sense to get 1.5 mil and then just ditch to Mexico or Canada and then make a lot more out of that.
Who knows? But, and I mean, hey, as calculated and devious as a guy as this seems, maybe he had other connections. Like you said, we don't even really officially know who this man was. So he could have been involved in like drug cartels
Yes.
or some sort of mafia. Like, who knows what kind of other connections and heists and schemes he was up to in
Oh,
life.
definitely.
So
This-
I guess context would make the amount make more sense, but still, it's just like, this seems like a lot to go to for some money.
Unless he owed it to somebody.
Oh yeah, maybe the mafia was after him.
And this was just some way that he thought, oh, I could get some quick money.
yeah,
I know
he
some
figured
things
I'd
about
rather
flights.
be on the run from the government forever than on the run from the mob.
Yeah.
Fair enough, my man.
So back to the story. After he asks for all of his demands, Florence would then walk to the other members of the flight crew, horrified, but on a mission.
Yeah, naturally.
Yeah.
I wouldn't expect her to just walk up and be like, hey, so you'll never guess what this guy in like 4B just said to me.
He was super cute.
He was like
and
smoking, like he offered me a cigarette.
no, I'm sure she was walking just like stiff as hell, slow steps.
Can't blink, can't
Yeah.
breathe. She's like, don't look at any other passengers or they'll know.
Yeah, dude. So she would tell the other members of the flight crew about the situation and what the hijacker or Cooper demanded. The flight crew managed to contact authorities on the ground who quickly scrambled to get something done before the flight arrived in Seattle. I mean, it's worth mentioning here that this flight was only supposed to take around 30 minutes.
Oh my gosh. And they were already in the air by the time this
Yes.
exchange happened between Cooper and the flight attendant. So like, they're probably like, we are supposed to be landing in 10 minutes. Like, you guys need to have all this stuff ready on the ground or else he's gonna blow everything up.
So tensions were high, to say the least.
Those conversion
New word every episode.
Yeah, the currency conversion stations at the airports are probably where they got half of those in one.
We'll talk about
They're
that.
like, anyone nearby with cash, put it in the pot.
It does turn into that. So let's get into the Seattle airport. Flight 305 wound up circling the Seattle airport for nearly 2 hours, while officials on the ground worked tirelessly to comply with Cooper's demands.
Because they were like, if we land and his shit's not ready, he might blow everything up. He's not gonna like wait and cooperate with us. But as long as we're in the air, maybe he'll wait and he'll stay calm and we'll tell him it's gonna be there.
I can't imagine being a passenger.
I was gonna
They
say,
don't know yet.
they have no idea what's going on. They're probably just being told that,
Like,
like, sorry, there's a
mechanical issues.
delay.
Yeah.
Like, we'll be landing shortly. Like, the airport's runway isn't ready for us yet, so just please be patient. Like,
Well, and meanwhile,
these passengers are like, what the fuck? I have a business meeting that I have to miss now because my half-hour flight is now 2.5-hour flight.
also, like, if you think about it, when you get close to the airport, at least I do, I start looking out the window and I'm looking at the ground below and I look at the airport that we can kind of see before you even get that close. Do they just see flashing lights and all these emergency vehicles and they're just circling for 2 hours?
Yeah, how low did they get? And I also want to know, was the Seattle, what's it called? The Sky Needle built yet? Because if so, then like
That's
even
a
if
good
they were pretty
question.
high up in the air, I feel like passengers looking out the window would definitely be able to see like Seattle's right there. Like why can't we just land?
So the Sky Needle was built in 61. So yes, it was around.
Yeah, that's some pretty funny stuff.
To just be sitting there watching this plane.
Yeah, because like I said, even if they're not that low yet, like they haven't really started their descent for landing because they know the situation that's happening and they're like, all right, we're going to circle until the airport's ready for us. I feel like they would still be able to see that Sky Needle if they're just circling the Seattle airport.
Oh yeah, no.
And they'd be looking out the window like, we're right there. Why can't we just land?
There are some, if you are interested in this case, there is a lot of information that the crew members specifically during all of this wrote about and talked about in interviews later on.
Yeah.
So there are some quotes out there from them of how they handled some of these situations. So if you're interested to know the nitty-gritty of what was going on in that plane, I highly recommend you look into that and read their stories because it's fascinating.
Yeah, I would be really interested to look some of that up. And I would also be interested to see if there's any passenger accounts.
Oh, there
Because,
probably are.
yeah, just because even though they didn't know what was going on, no one told them the truth of what was going on. I would like to see if any of them were like, did you know something was wrong? Or did you think it was just that there was like a mechanical error at the airport that delayed landing, like they said? Like, I would like to know if people felt the tension or if they really just kind of thought everything was okay. It was just taking a while.
I mean, I'm sure some felt the tension because I've had not actual issues on a plane, but like times where they've been like, oh, we have to delay the flight by 30 minutes. We just have to wait on the runway or stuff like that. And it's that alone in the back of my mind. I'm like, oh man, something's going on. But realistically, it's just like a logistical issue of no, the runway's packed. We need to make sure we get things cleared out. The weather
Right.
delayed.
It's just that because there was a weather delay, now
Yeah.
everyone is on a delay waiting for the runway to clear. But
But in my
that's
head,
anxiety for you.
Yes.
That's somebody's like, oh, don't worry, it's not a major issue. We'll be on the way shortly. And your heart sinks and you're like, they're lying. Something is wrong.
Yeah. So I think it's safe to say that, yeah, there was at least some
There was at least a
passengers
few
that were
people
like,
on board who were like, something is happening.
So the ransom money that Cooper demanded was collected by the FBI and it was taken from several Seattle banks in the area. And it consisted of 10,000 $20 bills. The bills themselves were not marked in any way, but the serial numbers were recorded in photos for use by the investigators later. Every serial
They did
number.
document what bills he got.
Yep.
Okay, that's really smart. Yeah, like they
Oh,
didn't
yeah.
tag the money or like tamper with it so he didn't, blow a bomb up and he thought everything was good. They're like, yep, take it, go ahead. But they're like, we'll be able to track you later. We'll have our time, don't worry.
Exactly. I mean, they knew. At around 5:39 p.m., Flight 305 landed at SEA and authorities awaited the handoff. A brave Northwest employee was for some reason tasked with carrying the cash and the 4 parachutes over to the aft section of the plane. Not a law enforcement officer or an FBI agent or a military person, just a random Northwest employee was given all of this stuff and told, okay, go carry this to DB. Go give this to the hijacker.
Oh my gosh, I wonder if they did that
Probably
out
to
of caution.
yes,
Like they
oh,
were just like,
honestly.
no, don't don't send anyone official to him or
Yeah.
he might snap. Just keep it within the plane industry. Like, that's so crazy though. Like, imagine you work for an airline and you just sell tickets behind a desk, or like you work loading luggage onto a plane all day and they're just like, hey, we need you to carry this up to those passengers. And you're like, all right, cool. And they're like, oh, by the way, it's like a hijacker situation and he's the man you're handing this all to. And you're like, the fuck?
Yeah, that's the ultimate. I don't get paid enough for this.
Right. Here's a bunch of parachutes and a bunch of cash.
So that brave employee did exactly what he was tasked to do, and he carried them over. Once he got there, another flight attendant by the name of Tina Mucklow retrieved the money and the parachutes from the aft boarding stairs of the aircraft. Tina would then be the one to hand the money and the chutes off to Cooper, where once he looked it over and seemed satisfied, he let Florence Schaffner, Alice Hancock, who were flight attendants, as well as 36 other passengers leave the plane to safety. So our girl Florence got out of there.
All right, but he kept the other stewardess.
Yes, the one who
delivered
brought
his
it, yes. And she has a lot of information. I don't know if it was a book or something, but there's like a whole lot of coverage on her experience being the one who was like with Cooper for most of this. This left Cooper with Captain William A. Scott, First Officer William J. Radickizik, hope I said that right, Flight Engineer Harold E. Anderson, and Flight Attendant Tina Mucklow. It was at this time that Cooper would tell the remaining flight crew that he wanted to fly south to Mexico. During this, he would give very specific instructions to the crew on how he intended to get there. Cooper instructed the crew of Flight 305 to fly at a very, very slow speed and keep the landing gear extended the entire time. He wanted the wing flaps lowered to 15 degrees and to remain below 10,000 feet with the cabin unpressurized. So again, this dude knew.
I wouldn't even know how to ask for those things, let alone to ask for them or what they mean. Like,
yeah, it's.
And why? Like, why does he want to go slow and low? I know he wants to jump out at some point, so it makes sense to a point, but it's like, if you're going from Seattle all the way to Mexico, you'd think, let's go straight there, and then when we get close, get ready for me to drop.
Yeah.
Like, he's like, no, landing gear out the whole time. You will stay low the whole time, and we are not going fast.
I'm wondering if some of the things that he said were to throw off authorities on what his goal was. Like like keeping the landing gear and some of those things might have been like, oh, he intends to take the plane completely and land it somewhere, maybe in Mexico.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know though, because again, I'm not super into planes or aviation, but this guy apparently knew his shit, which just blows my mind. Because I can't imagine being the captain and all of a sudden you hear the hijacker asking for all these specific things and you're like, oh, whoa. Cooper also seemed to demand that the door located at the back of the plane, called the ventral stairs, be opened and stay open during the flight. This was another way for passengers and cargo to be loaded onto the plane from the aft end. Now, this is where it gets a little interesting, because Flight 305 was aboard, again, a Boeing 727. This specific model of airplane was known to have a slight issue or flaw in the design. You see, those ventral stairs could be lowered mid-flight. This, from everything I could find, was not really intentional in the design, but it was there. Cooper seemed to have known this when he made these demands, so it goes to show that there were some premeditated thought to all of this, which is just so crazy how much knowledge he had.
And that's that one feature of the plane that we were talking about earlier. It's like, this is why he chose this flight. This was part of his plan all along. He's like, I know that stairway can open in the middle of flying, and that's how I'm getting out.
Yep. So Captain Scott told Cooper that they couldn't take off with the stairs down, as that would be far too dangerous, but they could open them mid-flight, like we stated. And frustrated, Cooper agreed. I mean, there wasn't much he could do if the captain's saying, like, look, dude, I literally can't do that.
Yeah, we can't take off with them down, but we can open them once we're in the air.
Yeah.
I'm trying to work with you here, buddy.
After some issues with refueling the plane, at 7:40 p.m., the Boeing 727 carrying the remaining flight crew and Cooper left Seattle, headed towards another refueling run in Nevada. Once the plane left Seattle, Cooper would begin to chain smoke at his seat, a little more nervously than before, and he also demanded that Tina stay with him for the time being.
He's lonely.
I don't know what...
He's nervous.
I think he does have a thing for flight attendants.
He's nervous and he needs a womanly touch to calm him. He's like, look, this is a big day for me. He's like, I've been plotting this for a while and I just really want it to all go right. Will you just sit with me? I think a pretty girl would just help my heartbeat slow down. I've got plenty. That's all that's in his briefcase for real. Inside all those cylinders, he just opens them up and it's just cartons and cartons of cigarettes.
So the plane would slowly rise to the demanded 10,000 feet altitude, and all the time Tina would sit next to Cooper, paralyzed with fear. Like I said, there are a lot of accounts of what Tina experienced during that. You can go ahead and research into that as much as you want. There's some video interviews. There's a lot of written interviews right after this. And I can't remember off the top of my head if it's a book or something like that. I'll be sure to put it in the description or on our blog post if it is. But it is interesting to hear her side of this and the time she spent with Cooper during all of this. The Boeing 727 was immediately followed by 2 military jets from McCord Air Force Base nearby. Pretty smart. So immediately the government was like, nope, track that plane. At around 8 p.m., Cooper would tell Tina Mucklow to go to the front of the plane and join the other flight crew. Mucklow would happily do so, and once she joined those at the cockpit, a sigh of relief was felt between the flight crew and Mucklow because they've been sitting up there the entire time having no idea what's going on to their fellow crew member.
Yeah, and they're like, oh my God, we had to leave her back there with him.
Yeah, and they speak highly of her too. The pilot has a lot of stuff that he says where he's like, she was the last defense between us and like a hijacker. Like I could not appreciate that more than anything really. Like it is nice to see how much they appreciate what she did.
Because girl power.
Exactly.
She's like, I am terrified, but I fucking got this. I'm going to sit with this man and keep him calm and find out everything I can about him.
While they all did feel some relief in that cockpit, it wasn't over yet. While sitting in the cockpit just waiting and on autopilot, at around 8:13 p.m., the flight crew would notice a signal light that appeared on their control panel. This was a signal to the pilots that the ventral stairs had been opened.
Open le door.
Such a great movie. Signaling that Cooper was ready to jump. The plane would pitch forward with its nose down, forcing the captain to level the plane back out, giving the impression that something or someone had leapt from the back. The Boeing 727, known as Flight 305, would arrive in Reno at 10:15 p.m. or 11:02 p.m. There are multiple reports. It gets a little weird. But that's because the story's technically over. They've landed. He's gone. Immediately that same night following the hijacking, the FBI launched an official investigation codenamed NORJAC, or Northwest Hijacking. The FBI agents, state troopers, sheriff's deputies, and Reno police all created a large perimeter around the aircraft after it landed, and after initial fears that the bomb was still on board, it was promptly searched by authorities who discovered that Cooper had left with the money and 2 of the 4 parachutes he was given.
2 of the parachutes were still on board the plane, though?
Yep.
Why'd he ask for 4?
Maybe he planned on taking Tina.
Oh.
That's the only thing I could think, because he took 2 and then maybe one other.
Maybe he did plan on taking her as a hostage, and then he decided not to for whatever reason.
I don't know.
Maybe it was just another thing to throw them off.
Literally,
who
yeah.
fucking knows?
Authorities would also find Cooper's black clip-on tie, which would be found to be from JCPenney, along with 8 Riley filter-tipped cigarette butts.
The fact that it's a clip-on tie.
Yeah.
And not a real tie. This is a man in his 40s.
Well, it's easier to take off. You know, he didn't want to have to, like, struggle as he's jumping.
He's like, I'm going to jump out of a plane here. I'm not trying to get strangled by my tie. Let me just...
So we stop at JC.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I love that he stopped at JCPenney on his way in. Like, classic.
You got the deals, man. And while they had the cigarette butts now, it didn't really exist at the time, but they were taken in hopes of eventually using them for DNA. The FBI would also recover about 66 latent fingerprints from the plane, which fingerprinting was around at the time, so this could have proven to be very useful in the investigation to come. Investigators would work heavy overtime the next few days as they gathered eyewitnesses' reports in Portland, Seattle, and Reno. With these eyewitness reports, the FBI came up with a few composite sketches of the suspect, which they began circulating to other law enforcement agencies as well. And I have them here so you can take a look. Those are the two of them.
Yeah, there's nothing really remarkable about how this guy looks. He looks like a standard 40-something-year-old white man.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I'm probably going to look like that when I'm 40, to be honest.
Yeah. In one picture, they show him wearing sunglasses, and in another, they picture him without sunglasses. And it's like, all right, there's not a whole lot of descriptors.
Yeah.
He's pretty basic.
It is important to note here as well that around this time is when a reporter from the Oregon Journal mistakenly referred to the suspect as D.B. Cooper instead of Dan Cooper, which is what was on his boarding pass and until this point was his only identifier. So with this mistake, the famous D.B. Cooper was born. It is a better sounding name.
And once something goes into writing, like that's that.
Yeah.
He might have been calling himself Dan all day to every single witness and person there, and all of the things in his boarding passes. All of that says Dan. But the second an article gets published about him, calling him DB, that's his new name.
Yep.
Done. The masses have decided.
And like I said, it's a better name. Dan Cooper, DB Cooper sounds.
DB Cooper
there's a
has
run.
a ring to it.
Yeah. Like it flows.
There you go.
So shortly after the hijacking, the FBI would attempt to locate the landing zone of Cooper using multiple methods to attempt this. One of these included dropping a sled out of the back of a military aircraft to replicate Cooper's jump, which this did end up helping them estimate the landing area near Mount St. Helens.
That just seems like
so rudimentary.
So juvenile. Like, it seems like a bunch of kids trying to solve their first case, but this is the U.S. military. They're like, what if we just take the same flight path and, like the flight attendant said, around the same time, we just drop a sled out the back when they said he jumped.
I mean, it helped.
And like wherever it lands, hopefully we find him there too.
It helped. Like I said, they estimate the landing area of DB Cooper to be near Mount St. Helens, southeast of Ariel, Washington. So, after they're dropping sleds out of planes, search efforts also focused on the nearby Clark and Cowlitz counties. This was to cover an area south and north of the Lewis River in the southwest Washington region. And this search was done on foot and by helicopter and included tons of federal and local agents. They were going balls to the wall to find this guy.
Could you imagine living in those counties and you're like outside walking one day, you're on a hike in the woods and you just see sleds falling from the sky? The next thing you know, there's choppers everywhere.
Yeah, military jeeps pull up. Military jeeps pull up and they all jump out. Secure the area.
The sled went that way. You're like, what is going on?
There's a little map there. And all these images, like I said, they should be edited, baked into the video, but they'll also be on our website and on social media for you guys to take a look at if you're just listening to us. Despite all the efforts done by authorities, Cooper nor any of his equipment or the ransom money would be found during this time. By late 1971, the FBI would circulate Cooper's description and their sketches nationwide and would issue a $50,000 reward for any information leading to the arrest. Of course, whenever a case is opened to the country like this and a reward is offered, leads began to pour in.
People just say anything so they can get that money.
Yeah, some were credible, but most were pretty easy to dismiss. Everyone wanted to claim that they knew the real DB Cooper. On April 7th, 1972, Richard F. McCoy Jr. hijacked a similar 727 flight from Newark to Los Angeles with demands of $500,000 and 4 parachutes. The modus operandi was so close that McCoy became the FBI's top suspect for D.B. Cooper. McCoy was later convicted of air piracy and escaped prison in 1974, where he was then fatally shot by police. So, at the time, McCoy was their top suspect, and although McCoy's profile and experience of Vietnam vet and a skydiver fit Cooper, investigators were never able to prove that he was the hijacker.
But he technically was a hijacker.
He was a hijacker.
And he was like a D.B. Cooper copycat.
Essentially, yes. And by the 5-year anniversary of this case, the FBI had considered over 800 suspects and eliminated all but a few dozen. Despite this intense effort, including Air Force fighters shadowing the plane after takeoff and local police sweeping the Cascades, the official investigation made no arrests in this period. The prevailing FBI theory was that Cooper likely did not survive the jump, given the poor parachutes and the rough terrain. But his body was never found. There are rumors or claims that one of the parachutes was pretty much marked with an X, which to the military was that this is a dud or a training chute. Like, you are not supposed to take this out in the actual air. And that was, in this claim, one of the ones that was missing.
So it is possible.
Oh, very possible.
That one of the 2 parachutes he took was not ever going to work in the first place.
So nearly 9 years later, Cooper's only confirmed trace on land turned up by accident. On February 10th, 1980, 8-year-old Brian Ingram was playing on the Columbia River sandbar near Vancouver, Washington, when he uncovered 3 bundles of rotting $20 bills. These bills totaled $5,800 and were still wrapped with rubber bands.
Happy birthday, kid.
Not so much. The FBI eventually got a hold of these bills after his father made him turn them in. And they...
Damn parents. I'd be like, nah, son. We found this money. It's our money.
I'll show you a picture of what the money looked like. You couldn't spend it.
You did say it was rotting.
Yeah. The FBI confirmed the serial numbers did match the ransom money given to D.B. Cooper. And this discovery revived public interest in this case. There's the picture of the money found.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
so it's not usable money anymore. That's so funny, though. Well, and that's crazy that A, some of it was found, and B, it was only like $5,000 or $6,000 worth when they gave him $200,000.
Yeah.
And it was all in one sack. I mean, as far as we know, maybe he took some out of the sack and shoved it in his pocket.
Well, yeah, and I'm sure it was kind of bundled.
Yeah.
But no, that's interesting. Analysis of the bills showed that they had been exposed to water and embedded in sediment. Later, forensic studies using diatoms of the bills indicated that the money had probably entered the river months after the hijacking, supporting theories that Cooper landed near the Washougal River. Again, hope I said that right. Upstream of where the money was found, rather than farther downstream as initially thought. The recovered bills were eventually split between the finder and the insurance companies. So, hey.
Okay, so the kid and his dad did get a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's more of a collector thing, though, at that point, not spendable.
That's still cool, though.
Although maybe it was, because it did go to insurance companies, too. So maybe some of it, like whatever they could recover was...
like restored as much as they could.
That's nice.
I'm still laughing over picturing D.B. Cooper taking his cash and this dud parachute and just jumping out the plane, and all the crew in the cockpit hears is Happy Thanksgiving.
A few branches after that.
Yeah. She's going, ah!
Oh, man.
This happened the night before Thanksgiving. But, like, imagine those people going home to eat dinner with their families the next day and just being like, I'm never going back to work again.
Yep,
I
I'm not
love you
taking
all
a flight.
so much. I am so thankful for this damn turkey.
Oh, my God.
All right, so what happened after this kid got his payday?
Apart from the 1980 find, No other ransom money or personal effects have ever been recovered. And Cooper's fate remained a mystery for quite a while, and honestly, still to this day, we don't know exactly what happened. In the 1980s and the 1990s, the D.B. Cooper case became a legend. The FBI continued to review cold leads, and notably, in July 1980, another copycat hijacker, Glenn K. Tripp, seized another Seattle-bound 727, demanding money and parachutes.
See, this is what I mean. Why didn't they just stop using the 727s after that? Because now it keeps happening. Where guys are like, all right, this one plane has an escape door. Like, let's go.
Glenn's motive was essentially just revenge against one of his previous bosses, and eventual fate, he was captured, were pretty unrelated to what the Cooper situation was. This dude seemed to have a pretty set mind, a pretty set motive on why he was doing all of this. He was getting revenge on somebody, and he was captured and interviewed, and they pretty much investigated that whole case. So it's just an interesting note that another copycat hijacker was popping up in the 80s and 90s. And like I said, if his was a revenge against a boss, that brings up the Cooper relation where he could have had some sort of criminal element or owing money to somebody or on the run and he needed a last-ditch effort. Like, it does add that little bit if it's shown to happen again.
Even more myth behind the man.
Yeah. The FBI kept a file of potential suspects and tips, but with limited new evidence, the case gradually went cold again. Media portrayals, including books and TV shows, including Leonard Nimoy's In Search Of, which came out in 1979, which does portray kind of like, without a paddle, a search for the D.B. Cooper and the treasure left by him. This all kept the story alive, but no significant developments really occurred. Rewards remained open up to $100,000 at one point, but no killer break ever emerged. By the late 1990s, a few investigators speculated that Cooper might have landed on tribal land or a lake, but systematic research failures and the rugged environment around that made the case seem pretty unsolvable. And the FBI never closed its investigation outright, but it was largely inactive as an open case for a while. So that brings us to the modern age. It sits on the FBI cold case files. No one's really looking at it. They think
it's still not closed.
No, it's not closed, but they think, there's really no point. I mean, we don't have much.
Yeah, no one's really investigating anymore because they've pretty much deemed it unsolvable, but they also won't close it as unsolvable.
Yep.
They're like, there's just enough hope out there that maybe one day he will resurface. Or some more of his money will show up in circulation somewhere and they'll be able to find some more details.
But that brings us to the modern age, and advances in forensic science and renewed public tips prompted occasional re-examinations into this case from time to time. So we're going to get into some of those, which that includes the DNA and tie evidence. The FBI had preserved Cooper's clip-on tie, and in 2011, FBI agents received a tip about Lynn Doyle L.D. Cooper, a suspect in Oregon. They obtained DNA from L.D. Cooper's relatives and compared it to a DNA swab from the tie, and the results were unfortunately not a match. Special Agent Fred Gutt noted that even the DNA might not have belonged to Cooper, as the tie could have been purchased secondhand. This outcome eventually rules out L.D. Cooper and a few other suspects, but investigators noted it did not entirely negate their other leads. So some other suspects at this time, once they got the DNA, they were able to run it. It didn't really match up with who they had in their lists. But you have other people at the same time saying that might not have even been Cooper's DNA. If he did buy it secondhand.
There's no way to know for sure, even if he didn't buy it secondhand. What if it's the JCPenney
employee
store clerk's hands? Or what if it's Tina the stewardess? Like, she was with him. What if he made her touch his tie?
I mean, he was smart about taking back all the notes.
Exactly.
And you might be thinking, okay, but the cigarette butts, that's how we got them. Those touched his mouth. That has to be his DNA.
But you still need to have a match in the system to be able to know who it is. You can't just read DNA and it points to a person on Earth with a location GPS, you know?
Exactly. And it gets a little more frustrating than that, because in one of the more irritating twists for the Cooper case watchers, the FBI lost the cigarette butts that D.B. Cooper left behind on Flight 305.
So by the time DNA was an option, all they had left was the tie?
Cooper smoked 8 Riley filter-tipped cigarettes during the hijacking and left the butts in the armrest ashtray at his seat. Those butts were originally collected as evidence after the plane landed, and the passengers and crew were interviewed, but at some point, likely in the early years of the investigation, before DNA testing was part of the forensic protocol, the butts were either misplaced, discarded, or improperly stored, and
stolen.
They no longer exist in the FBI's evidence archive. This loss is significant because modern DNA analysis could have potentially pulled a usable profile from those cigarette filters. Had they been preserved, investigators could have tested them against known suspects, especially in the decades after DNA forensics became reliable in 1990s and 2000s.
Leave it to the authorities to lose the most vital evidence.
I was like, literally the key to the case.
Wouldn't be the first time I heard that one.
That still just blows me away.
I think it's kind of funny. Now, I know you said they got a tip about it, so like clearly I don't know all the context, but the fact that they hear somebody who's named L.D. Cooper and they're like, oh my God, that sounds the same. They've got to be a relative. Let's get that DNA.
I didn't add it in here, but there is a section, if you read I think it's the FBI investigation files on this. They interviewed everybody with the last name Cooper, in those 2 counties.
Yeah, A, that's got to be a pretty common last name. And B, don't you think if this man survived and was still living in the U.S. today, he probably would have changed his name? Or maybe Cooper was a fake name to begin with and he doesn't have that name? Why would he still be going by the name that he's being hunted by?
Yeah, it's hard to see that.
And then have children and give them that name too. It just seems a little silly.
No, I'm sure you changed that pretty quickly.
Yeah, if you're on the run from the FBI and possibly the mob or something too, you're going to be changing your name.
Other modern advancements in this were just some published investigations that a lot of private researchers wrote some books about during this time, and they claimed some new theories. So, for example, some focused on a man named Robert Rackstraw, who was a Vietnam helicopter pilot, or Ken Christensen, who was a paratrooper instructor. And one team claimed to find coded messages in Cooper's communications that kind of linked him to these more military-type positions. However, none of these theories really swayed FBI opinion, and there's no real concrete evidence that the FBI has said, yes, there are coded messages. This is a lot of private or internet sleuths looking into this and making their own judgments, which is fine. I'm not saying it's bad, but
it's just a lot of speculation.
Yes, there's not a lot of backing to it. So that brings us to July 2016. On the 45th anniversary of the crime, on July 8th, 2016, the FBI announced it was redirecting resources away from the Cooper case.
Wait, how could that be the anniversary of the crime if it happened on Thanksgiving Eve, but this is July?
The 45th year.
Oh, it's just talking about the year.
Yeah, my bad. I mean, that is worded weird. So that brings us to July 2016. On the 45th anniversary of the crimes, the FBI announced it was redirecting resources away from the Cooper case. The Seattle FBI stated that after 45 years of investigation, one of the longest and most exhaustive in FBI history, no credible new evidence had emerged and no suspect could be proven guilty.
And at this point, we can probably presume even if he had survived the landing, he's probably dead by now. Because if he was already in his mid-40s...
Yeah, he's in his 80s.
This is 45 years later. He's 90 years old.
Yeah.
The guy's gone.
Yeah. From that point, the FBI closed its active casework, though all the evidence was still preserved, hopefully better than the cigarette butts. Come on, guys.
Don't worry, that clip-on tie is safe in a plastic baggie in storage locker somewhere.
Yeah, yeah. They'll never lose it. Maybe someone lost the fucking tie and just replaced it. Like you have an intern at the FBI who's like, hey, go get me that tie. We're reopening the DB Cooper case.
And he's like, shit, I threw the tie and cigarette butts away. Well, he only asked for the tie. I'll just go grab a black clip-on tie from Penny's.
Yeah, I can go buy one real quick. I mean, I'm wearing a black tie. I could just go put this in the bag.
That's why it was a clip-on. DB Cooper actually had a real tie, but this intern was wearing a clip-on, and he's like, shit, okay, here.
So no identification of Cooper had been made, and tips, though many, had yielded no breakthrough. The case officially became a legendary cold case. That's why we're talking about it today. Despite the FBI closure, recent years have seen new clues and a lot of media attention. In 2020, scientists analyzed the dirt and diatoms on the 1980 money bundles, and their work confirmed that the bills were likely deposited in springtime and not in November 1971. This research suggested Cooper's landing zone was a lot farther north, near the Washougal, Columbia area. And it was assumed earlier than this that he landed a lot farther south in Washington, so they might have been even just searching in the wrong area initially.
And maybe he did survive, and then he was just going along the river burying little pockets of money to come back for later in case.
Yep.
That's why it was only a little bit that was found. He's like, let me stash some here and some there, and I'll use the rest as my getaway money for now.
That literally, it sounds like he was like plotting his whole getaway. Just, I'll bury this if I need to come back to it. It's emergency cash. That's so interesting. That takes us to the year 2022. In mid-2022, skydiving enthusiast Dan Grider found an old military-style parachute rig in an unused barn on a North Carolina farm. The property once belonged to Richard McCoy II, the son of hijacker Richard McCoy Jr. The rig's design, including a modified deployment system, matched the kind thought to be used by Cooper in the jump. And in late 2023, after Grider publicized his finds on social media, the FBI retrieved the parachute, a harness, and a logbook from the McCoy property. Richard McCoy Jr. had been considered a prime suspect for years because, well, he essentially did the same thing in 1972. And McCoy's surviving children have stated that they believe their father was D.B. Cooper.
Oh my God. Why did they clear him, though? Because he was a suspect, and then they decided there's
he
no
died.
evidence. Oh, he died.
He escaped from prison, during the investigation.
Right, he escaped. That's right. They did arrest him, and then he escaped from prison, and they shot him. Okay, I forgot. I was like, wait, why didn't they?
And I'm not sure, but I'm assuming they probably did, and this is kind of grim, but exhume his body and cross-compare the DNA from the tie. But again, the tie, we don't know how likely that was actually Cooper's DNA, so it's all wishy-washy. This development, though, a parachute physically linked to the McCoy's family reignited discussion that Richard McCoy Jr. may indeed have been D.B. Cooper.
Especially if all the kids and grandkids are like, yeah, we definitely think it was him.
Yeah, his whole family.
That could just be like, the grandkids are like, we've got a war vet criminal granddad. Like, let's make up some crazy legends about his life to tell our younger cousins and stuff. Like that, it could just kind of be like kid adventurous stories and exaggerations.
And your granddad was a hijacker.
And yeah, your granddad was a war vet criminal hijacker, prison con escapee. Like he was kind of crazy. So you've got enough to work with. It could have just been that, like, because that legend was there and they knew he was a suspect, they're all like, oh, he definitely did it.
Yeah.
And it's like, maybe there was no real concrete proof and the kids just wanted to run with that story. But still, like, even as adults, they're being interviewed and they're like, oh yeah, we definitely think it was him.
Hey, sometimes family knows best though,
Family sees what the public doesn't.
Yeah, exactly.
I wonder if he at least gave some of them kids some money.
Hopefully.
Did you get any inheritance from this mofo?
Yeah, did you get a really good Christmas in 1971? So now we're going to talk about some of the cultural legacy that this whole story had left behind, because at this point, even to today, it's a closed case from the FBI and there are no definitive suspects or leads.
It's because I did it.
Oh, shit. How old are you?
That's why they never caught me, because I wasn't born yet in 1971.
I was like, hold
It
on.
was the perfect crime.
I'm not saying I know love and sickness and in health, but if I find out you're 70 years old,
My parents were like toddlers in 1971. Like, they had barely been born.
So D.B. Cooper had become an American folklore figure. He committed the perfect crime and then just vanished. That image made him a folk hero of sorts.
I was gonna say, like, low key, my man.
No,
He injured
and nobody got nobody got
people.
hurt.
He conned the government out of money and then just dipped.
The story has inspired countless references in books, film, TV, and music.
And copycat criminals.
Of course, yeah. For example, the 2004 comedy Without a Paddle features characters searching for Cooper's treasure, and creator David Lynch reportedly named his Twin Peaks character Dale Cooper after the skyjacker. Songs like folk ballads, novels, and even comic books have recounted or fictionalized this hijacking, and true crime podcasts and documentaries, such as HBO's The Mystery of D.B. Cooper, which came out in 2022, keep the public fascination in this case just constantly alive. In the absence of definitive new evidence, every detail of the case is endlessly re-examined. Modern DNA and forensic genealogy are hoped for by enthusiasts, though unusable DNA from the tie is pretty dubious. But as of 2025, the only confirmed physical evidence of the crime beyond the aircraft is the 1980 money find and the recovered parachutes. No human trace, fingerprints, body, or DNA have been able to identify Cooper. The FBI's stance remains that without hard proof, i.e. Cooper's body or spent ransom bills appearing decades later, this case stays open-ended. So let's talk about some theories and suspects. The meat and potatoes of it all. The first one I have here is the dead man's dive. This is one of the most widely accepted theories, especially by the FBI, and it's that D.B. Cooper died during or shortly after his parachute jump. The night he bailed out of the Boeing 727 was cold, rainy, and pitch black. He was more than 10,000 feet in the air, jumping into a remote, heavily forested area of Washington state. He only wore a business suit, loafers, and a lightweight trench coat. No helmet, no gloves, no survival gear. On top of that, he chose an older, non-steerable type of military parachute, which suggests he either didn't really care about controlling his landing or didn't truly understand the difference in chutes. The terrain below him was rough, dense woods, rivers, cliffs, and there were no obvious clearings. If he landed badly or in the freezing Lewis River, it's entirely plausible that he just died on impact or shortly after due to injury or exposure.
Yeah, and what are you going to do? Crawl to the nearest hospital 80 miles away through the wilderness? And then you'll be turned in. And the second you get there, the cops will also be there.
Yeah, no, a bear's going to just eat you.
I will say, he knew so much about the plane and what to ask for that, like, him not knowing the difference between parachutes seems kind of far-fetched. Like, you'd think he would know about that, too. So maybe he really did just... He's like, you know what? I don't care if I make it out of this. Like,
that's why I think it was like, I owe this money.
Yeah, I'm like, it brings me back to the mafia or cartel type, the criminal background theory, where it's like, no, there was someone else who demanded this money and used him as the vessel to get it.
Yep.
And maybe it wasn't even his plan, and that's why he knew what to ask for, is because he was told. And he was not supposed to live after this. It was just get the money, throw it out the plane, and we'll collect it from the landing spot. And if you make it out,
you live.
good for you. But whatever.
It is interesting because, like you said, he knew a lot about planes, but when it came to the shoot, it does throw it up in the air where it's like, huh, was that intentional?
But I mean, whether it was intentional or not, I do think that is very, very, very plausible that he just did not survive the jump.
Yeah.
Or he died very shortly after. Like maybe he initially survived, but then in the next few days he kicked it because of exposure and injury and bears and whatnot. Um, but I think that's a very likely possibility. I mean, like you said, even if he had the best working parachute, it's freezing, it's raining and stormy. There's mountains and woods and lakes and rivers. Like, who knows where you're landing and how?
Yeah, that
Land's getting stuck in a tree and he's just dangling from the
for
parachute.
hours,
like-
yeah. No, where he was landing was not a solid area. So other than him dying, the next theory I have here is called the Great Escape. There's nothing. So, how do I phrase this? So this enduring theory is that Cooper survived the jump and escaped, disappearing into a new life entirely. Proponents of this view point to the meticulous way Cooper carried out the hijacking. He was calm, polite, deliberate. He knew about the Boeing 727's aft stair mechanism, a very specific detail, and he was very careful to instruct the pilots to fly at a low altitude and a slow speed, making the jump technically survivable. Some believe he had military experience or skydiving training. The fact that neither Cooper nor the bulk of the ransom money was ever found might mean that he made a clean getaway and lived quietly under a new identity. Some people have claimed on their deathbeds to be Cooper, and some suspects like Richard McCoy and Kenneth Christensen have drawn serious attention, though none of them have been definitively linked to this case. The money found in 1980 complicates this theory as it was pretty far off course from the suspected drop zone, but some suggest it was lost, discarded, or buried deliberately to mislead investigators.
Yeah, I mean, that was another one I was saying is possible earlier. I'm like, no, maybe he just buried some either to throw off the course of the investigation or to come back for later in a pinch.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, went and changed his name and lived quietly. And who knows, maybe he's still involved with some sort of criminal gang who was able to help him exchange that money somewhere without the government's knowledge. Like, I don't know how that black market shit works.
I mean, yeah, we're not criminals.
I feel like somebody could make it go away.
So, the other theories that I have mentioned here are pretty much just little tidbits. Some say that the money got away, which is basically that Cooper survived the jump and the money unfortunately did not. So Cooper lands somewhere maybe far off course and just leaves. Maybe it is Richard McCoy and he goes, I'm trying again next year.
He's like, damn it, I don't know where the money landed. I can't find it. I'm just going to do it again next year. I'll ask for even more.
Yep.
I'm going to stuff some in my pockets this time.
Some say also that DB Cooper was trying to send a message to a lot of, like you said, maybe the government or a specific person. The alias he used, Dan Cooper, matches the name of a French language comic book hero from Belgium, a Canadian Air Force pilot who conducts a daring parachute missions and outwits his enemies. These comics were never translated into English, suggesting that the hijacker may have spent time in Europe or Canada, or had some connection to the region, but the way he carried out the crime without violence, treating flight attendants respectfully, and maintaining composure throughout it, has led to some, like we said, seeing him as kind of an anti-hero. Maybe the hijacking wasn't about the thrill, revenge, or personal satisfaction than the money itself.
That's interesting that it almost seems like his story was based on a comic book. Like maybe he read these comics and was inspired as a kid.
Yeah.
And he's like, you know what? I'm going to go do this.
They probably got pissed. He was probably pissed then when they changed it to DB Cooper. Because if he picked his name as, like, for a specific reason.
He's like, I chose Dan Cooper after Dan Cooper. You changed it to DB? The hell?
And the last theory to just bring up is that maybe Dan did live and the money did make it, but he just got lost in the vast wilderness of the Washington forest. That's why they never found the body near any drop zone, is he traveled and he eventually just went maybe possibly into a more remote region without really knowing the area.
I think that's what happened. That's what happens in Without a Paddle, is they find
Yep,
him,
they
and
do.
he's like this scraggly, homeless wilderness man.
He's dead.
But he, like,
Yeah.
looks like a scraggly,
Yeah.
homeless wilderness man. Like, he clearly lived in
Yes,
the wilderness.
yes. Oh, yeah, yeah.
Like,
They
he,
find him underground. Like,
yeah.
yeah.
He's, like, in a cave or whatever.
Although,
almost.
actually, in that movie, no, I think he died during the parachute because they find his parachute with him.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. So he just died on impact. I think in that movie, he literally
That's
crushed
right.
into the ground and then like got buried over essentially, and then they find him underneath.
All right, I must be thinking of something else then. I was like,
We got to rewatch that movie.
I
That movie's
know.
great. If you haven't seen it after this podcast, watch that movie. It's amazing.
so funny.
But I mean, that one to me does. It's either he died or he got lost in the woods. Truly, to me, I don't
And
think that
became
this
a
man.
crazy, wild man.
Yeah. But despite the dozens of suspects and years of investigation, no single theory fully explains everything. There are holes in all of them, no definitive body, no conclusive identity, no proof of life or death. That's what makes the D.B. Cooper mystery so enduring. It's a crime with a clear beginning, a dramatic middle, and no end. Whether he died in the cold Washington woods or sipped pina coladas in South America under a fake name, the legend of Cooper remains exactly that, a legend. He stepped onto a plane in a business suit, ordered a bourbon and soda, hijacked a Boeing 727, leapt into the night with $200,000, and vanished into mystery. No body, no parachute, no final chapter.
No cigarette butts.
No cigarette butts. Just a name we all know. D.B. Cooper. Was he a desperate man with nothing to lose? A criminal mastermind who beat the system? Or just the greatest dinner party mystery of the 20th century? Who was D.B. Cooper? What do you think happened?
Honestly, I don't know with this one, because I feel like all the theories are pretty plausible. Like, he definitely could have just died in the jump. He definitely could have survived the jump and lived quietly in some criminal lowlife, down low,
Lifestyle.
under the radar life.
Yeah.
Or maybe he was McCoy. Or maybe he was lost in the woods and became a caveman on the run from society. Like, I think every single one of these theories is like, that could track.
Like I said, it's fascinating because it has the clear beginning, this intense middle section,
Yeah.
and then nothing.
I will say, like, this story is fun to me because I was telling you earlier, I'm like, this one, yes, it's a crime and it's serious and high stakes. I mean, it's a man who's committing a heist and he's got a bomb and people are scared. But at the end of the day, like, he didn't hurt anybody except maybe himself. Stole some money from the government in the midsection. And it's like, you know what? I can laugh at this kind of crime.
Yeah.
Like, this
Oh,
is
yeah.
kind of a funny story. Nobody got hurt. The government got ripped off, and this guy got away with a fake name, and just nobody never saw him again. Like,
No, it's wild.
kind of wild.
I put quotation marks over it when I said it, but it really is kind of the perfect crime, at least for the time. I mean, there were 300 something hijackings happening a year. He knew that. He took advantage of every opportunity that he could during this to pull this off.
I honestly think that the theory I feel like in my gut is the real one, is that he had some sort of criminal background connection.
Yeah.
And he was not the sole mastermind behind this crime. I think that there was some greater force at play, whether it was some sort of mob or mafia or cartel or gang. I think there was some other criminals who were like, this is what needs to happen. And whether he was on board with it or he was being told to do it for them because he owed them or whatever, I feel like this is so calculated for one guy to pull off, especially for him to seem so calm and he's like being polite. Like, you'd think somebody like this would be like, do what I say or I'll fucking kill you. And instead he's like, how you doing, sweetheart? You want a cigarette? Like,
Yeah.
and it's like, well, hang on. It's like, did somebody put you up to this? And then like no one ever sees him again. They only find some of the money. I'm like, And then the fact that none of the money was ever seen in rotation again, in the currency rotation, and it was never found buried anywhere else, just a small amount of it. I feel like it's probably because it was put back in the hands of criminals who are only trading with other criminals, and that kind of cash doesn't enter the system where the FBI can track it.
Yeah, but you might think it of one bill out of
Yeah,
200,000.
maybe occasionally.
But I mean, who's really
But
tracking?
yeah,
Unless it ends up at a bank, if it's just like a small town and
if you're using it, I'm going to tell you right now, if somebody pays in cash at my job or like one of the restaurants I've worked at, somebody gives me a cash tip. The only place I pay for cash and things is like a Starbucks or a gas station. Like, they're not documenting every bill they get. They're just going to do their deposits at the bank at the end of the night or give it as change to some other customer, and it never technically gets recorded that it was there.
I do think the deposits at the bank is where the
That's
serial
where it would
numbers
show
get
up.
recorded
That's
at.
where it would show up. Yeah.
But
But
I
yeah,
agree with
I don't
you.
know. I'm like,
No,
I just feel like there has to be something else in this guy's life.
there's definitely a criminal element.
Yeah.
This wasn't
This
just I
wasn't
woke
just
up.
some businessman who was like, I am going to create the most intense calculated scheme to hijack a plane and steal some money and then go on the run. Like,
No,
it's like there was some motive here, and I think it had something to do with a gang.
definitely. I'm ended on that. It definitely had something to do with either he owed someone money, he had to get money, he was part or leading some sort of criminal organization, but there was some mafia type group behind this.
Yeah, there was more criminal activity happening in this case than meets
Just
the eye.
Do I think he lived? I have two conflicting points there. If he did, I kind of think the Richard McCoy story.
I was gonna say, if he lived, I kind of think that it must be McCoy.
Yeah, 100%. If he died, though, then I could see that, though. I can just see him dying. Like, I also just
And then
see...
McCoy just being a copycat because
Yeah.
he was also, I mean, he had the military past with that experience, and
Yes.
maybe he had some PTSD. He was hard. Everybody was hard in economic times. He'd
Yep.
seen that DB Cooper got away with it a year prior, and he figured, shit,
Might as well.
I could do this.
Well, that's the mystery. That's the story. So now we move on to date night debrief. My question for tonight is, what is your ideal short planned date?
My ideal short planned date?
Yeah.
You mean,
So like it's a Friday night and you're like, oh, I just realized, we're both free from 6 to 10. Let's do something. Let's have a date night.
okay, so like minimal time to plan, but you got the whole evening.
Yes. Yeah. Not a short length date. No, you have the whole evening, but like, oh, we just have time to do this.
Yeah,
I will say money's not an object. You can go crazy.
we could go anywhere.
Yeah. We could do anything. We just got to think of something to do.
I will say, as much as I could come up with a really fun, creative answer, I feel like the real answer is like what happened yesterday, where we're like, let's make dinner together. And as we're making dinner, we realize, oh, shoot, we don't have this ingredient. Oh, that's okay. We'll replace it with that. Oh, shoot, this ingredient's expired. Screw it. This isn't working out. Let's just go out to eat and get some drinks and just hang out instead. Like, and we went out to dinner and we had some good food and we sat at the bar and we walked around, and it was like, this was a really fun night and a
Yeah.
fun date night. And it literally just started out as like, dinner is not like, we are trying to cook and we're both clearly having a rough day and we're very tired and the kitchen is not cooperating with us. And rather than getting all frustrated about it, we're both just like, screw it, let's go to the bar, let's have a margarita, let's share some nachos and just make it a date night.
Give me one margarita.
Yeah, it was a good time. And I feel like that's very realistic because I'm an indecisive person and I need time to plan things.
I get that.
So when it's like, okay, we have time right now, what do you want to do? It's hard for me to actually create a plan. It's like, well, let's just go to a restaurant.
Yes,
Like, let's
yeah.
just go on a walk. Something simple but reliable.
Okay. I like that answer. I think for me, it is weather dependent, but I loved during last summer when it was just like, oh, let's go kayaking. Because that's something it's like, okay, well, let's throw on some shorts. We'll drive down to the park, pay $40 to rent the kayak, and then it's like 3 hours of an activity. And that's awesome. It's beautiful out. It's fun. We both like it. You're at
Yeah.
a park. You can bring lunch. That's a very quick, immediate thing that, you work out.
It spent some time in the sun,
Yeah, you
on
get to
the
spend some time in
water,
the sun, in the water.
nature.
It's fun. It's just enjoyable. So I do like that. And I thought we had a really good time last year.
Yeah, I was just talking about that this morning. I'm like, we need to go bike riding on the trails and go
Yes.
kayaking again soon. Next time we have a day off where it's not pouring rain like today, because I do like that. And we did that pretty spontaneously a lot last summer where
Oh,
like
yeah.
we'd be free one day and we're like, well, what do you want to do today? You got any plans? Oh, you don't?
Well, let's just do
Yeah,
this.
you want to go to the park and go kayaking?
Yeah.
Like, all right, cool, let's go. And that is fun. Nice and peaceful. You get alone time. It's just the two of you in the boat.
I loved it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's pretty much it for the date night debrief then. Do you have any free talk or updates you want to talk about?
We just started our wedding season
That's
for
true.
photo and video this weekend. We had a doubleheader wedding weekend. So
Got a lot of editing.
yeah, we had 2 weddings in 3 days, and it was a lot, but it was fun. And both weddings were so fun and beautiful, and they had really good weather, which I was so happy for
Yes.
them.
Yes. We had projected rain all weekend. And
Oh yeah,
by the
like
time the
both
weddings
weddings,
came
it was like,
around,
is it gonna rain? Is it gonna rain? Are they gonna have to move ceremony inside? And it worked out perfect
Yep.
for both couples. So I was so happy for them. And the photos are looking great, and the videos are looking great. So that's all exciting for me. But otherwise, I think that's really about it. That's all we got going on right now.
I've just been learning to ride my motorcycle. It's been fun. We got some things planned for the summer coming up, maybe the July and the September months. We'll keep you updated on that, so just keep an eye out. But I think that's about it, really. So thank you guys so much for joining us, and be sure to come back every other week for a brand new episode and a brand new mystery.
We hope you all enjoyed today's mystery and story. And don't forget, you can send us episode ideas or love letters. Our email address is mysterydatepodcast@gmail.com. And if you are sending an episode idea, please be sure to leave episode idea in the subject line so we can find it easily.
Also, be sure to share this podcast with your friends or even your enemies. We're not going to judge. It really helps us a lot when you guys share this with your friends. We've seen it so much on the back end when we tell people about it and they're like, oh, I'm going to go listen to it, or I'm going to go tell these people about it. And we watch all those numbers go up, and it's an amazing feeling, because the more people that listen to us, maybe the more episodes we get to put out. And it's really just a happy feeling when we're knowing and getting recognized, when we're knowing and seeing the actual improvement to what we're doing. It's great, and we appreciate all of you for that. But also stop by our website, mysterydatepodcast.com. You can leave a voice message there. We might listen to it on the show, and there's lots of other goodies.
And follow us on social media at Mystery Date Podcast for updates on the show and our life. And tune in next episode.
That's all. So be safe and have a good rest of your day or night.
And remember, every good mystery deserves a date.
Bye.
Bye.